Thanks, Kai. Governor Gavin Newsome is breaking with his party on the issue of transgender athletes in sports. The governor describing it as unfair when transgender athletes compete in girls' and women's sports.
He made those comments on his podcast episode featuring conservative activist and media personality Charlie Kirk. Capitol correspondent Aton Wallace joining us now with reaction. Hi, Aton.
Well, Lou and Glenn, good afternoon to you. Good afternoon to everybody in Southern California. And yeah, here at the state capitol, well, members of the LGBTQ caucus say they're outraged over the governor's remarks. Republicans, meantime, say they agree with what the governor had to say about transgender athletes, but they do not trust him to put his words into action.
Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that.
Governor Gavin Newsome making clear where he stands on transgender athletes, specifically those who've transitioned from male to female competing in girls' and women's sports.
It is an issue of fairness. So it's deeply unfair.
The governor making those comments on the first episode of his new podcast, This is Gavin Newsome. His first guest, conservative activist and pro-Trump media personality, Charlie Kirk.
This one is an 80-20 issue. New York Times poll, right? That's
I agree with you. We're getting crushed on.
Crushed. And what's not fair is just for like entire women's sports.
I agree. By the way, I agree with you.
Newsome, though, adding he feels it is important the transgender community is not marginalized.
These poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue that I have a hard time with as well. So both things I can hold in my hand.
Still, for trans activist and leader Bambi Salcedo with the Trans Latinx Coalition, Newsome's message on trans athletes is not acceptable.
My emotions really are one of anger and one of disappointment. Our governor should be the one who is there to protect us, right? Particularly in these political times. And with his remarks, really says that he is not standing in solidarity with one of the most marginalized populations.
It's a sentiment echoed in this statement by the California LGBTQ Legislative Caucus. Quote, sometimes Gavin Newsome goes for the profile and courage, sometimes not. We woke up profoundly sickened and frustrated by these remarks. Individual members of the caucus and some of Newsome's fellow Democrats taking it a step further. This from Assemblymember Alex Lee. Quote, what the expletive? Trans people and LGBTQ plus people are under attack. We don't need our governor caving to conservative talking points that further hurt and scapegoat 1% of the population. On that same note, San Francisco Democratic Senator Scott Wiener writing Charlie Kirk is a vile bigot and standing with him on this issue is profoundly disturbing. Republican Assemblymember Bill Asaley, meantime, says he agrees with what the governor had to say, but he does not have confidence the governor will actually turn his words into legislation.
It's empty talk. It's just to get a headline and make it look like he's more moderate than he really is.
Why do you think Governor Gavin Newsome is doing this?
Governor Gavin Newsom's podcast is a really smart move. If he can talk to Donald Trump voters, that's a plus for Democrats, because right now the mainstream of the Democratic Party is that Donald Trump is bad and his supporters are deplorables. And Gavin Newsome is smart enough to realize that we need to talk to these voters and we need to pull some of them back into the Democratic Party.
And as for the governor's next episode, well, his team tells me it will be released in the coming days. As for who his special guest will be then, that is not so clear. Reporting live here at the state capitol, Aton Wallace, KTLA 5 News. Glenn and Lou, back to you.
Well, Aton, it's great to have you with us today. And obviously, the matter of transgender athletes was only one of the several topics Newsome discussed in the podcast episode. What are some of the other issues he and Charlie talked about that stood out?
That's a great point, Lou. And you know what? In fact, this whole episode was an hour and 10 minutes, even a little bit longer than that. So you're absolutely right. A lot came up here. There was a number of things that Governor Newsome discussed, everything from his son really admiring Charlie Kirk, to more substantive issues, including Newsome calling out members of his own party for how they've responded to President Donald Trump. And then there was Newsome even on the matter of the police, and how he said that he thought that defunding the police, in his words, is, quote, lunacy. Glenn and Lou.
All right. Aton Wallace at the state capitol in Sacramento. Thanks for joining us.